For years, the world taught you that God is somewhere outside you watching, judging, deciding what you may or may not have. But that is the greatest lie ever told. God isn't up there. He is right here, breathing through the words I am. And until you see that, you'll keep praying to a sky that never answers, instead of awakening the power that always does. Tonight, I'll show you the truth that sets man free, that God is not a being you must please, but the awareness within you that creates. In this teaching, I will reveal the single misconception that has kept humanity powerless, the false belief that God and man are separate. Once you see that God is not a distant ruler but your own awareness of being, everything changes. You'll stop waiting for answers and begin speaking them into being. You learn to use the divine name I am consciously to turn imagination into experience and prayer into creation. This isn't philosophy, it's law. And when you understand it, you'll discover that every miracle recorded in Scripture was never history. It was your biography, waiting to be lived. I know how it feels to reach for help in the dark, to pray for change and hear only silence, to ask for signs, for proof, for a glimpse of something greater, and wonder if anyone listens. For years I did the same, believing God was somewhere outside, withholding answers until I became worthy. But one night, the silence spoke. And in that moment, I saw that the voice I called God was my own imagination whispering back to me. That realization changed everything. I stopped pleading with heaven and began creating from it. And tonight, I will lead you through that same realization so you may know the God who has always been you. In this lesson, we'll pierce the oldest veil of misunderstanding, the idea that God is a being outside of man. I'll show you the true meaning of God in Christ, reconciling the world unto Himself, and how to apply that truth in your own life until the outer world mirrors your inner command. We'll uncover why every prayer seems unanswered, until you stop praying to God and begin praying as God. I'll share the hidden scripture that reveals this mystery, the practical way to prove it, and the inner experience that changes everything you believe about divinity. Stay with me until the end, for I'll take you beyond belief into direct knowing, where the I am within you stands revealed as the only creator there is. Here's something almost no one sees, and yet it is the single cause of all human suffering. The greatest tragedy of man's history is not war, nor greed, nor ignorance. It is the belief that God and man are two. The entire weight of fear, guilt, helplessness, and despair rests upon that one lie, that somewhere beyond the clouds sits a being, distant and unapproachable, holding the strings of our fate. I tell you now, that belief is the root of bondage. It has enslaved generations to the illusion of separation, and every prayer uttered to a sky that never answers is but an echo of man's forgetfulness of himself. When I first came to understand this, it shocked me, because I too had prayed to the heavens. I had knelt in fear, hoping for mercy, waiting for signs. I imagined a throne, a face, a voice, and I called that imagination God. What I did not yet realize was that the very act of imagining was God in motion. Man creates his idols because he has forgotten that imagination itself is divine. The idol carved in stone, or thought of as a cosmic father, is only man externalizing what he cannot yet accept as his own creative power. The ancient tribes looked up at thunder and saw judgment. They saw lightning and called it the wrath of a god. They trembled before the sky because they could not comprehend that the thunder and the lightning were symbols of the mind, the sound and flash of imagination, creating form. And so they carved what they feared into the shape of a being, then bowed to it. They were not wrong to sense the power. They were wrong to think it was outside of them. What man fears, he worships. What he does not yet master, he kneels before. When I speak of idols, I don't mean statues alone. I mean the invisible idols in the mind, the doctrines, the dogmas, the inherited images of a being up there who must be pleased before life can bless you. Every time you say, God will decide, you bow before that idol. Every time you wait for divine permission to prosper, to heal, to be free, you kneel before that false image. You have taken the living God within you, the I am that breathes your being, and projected him onto a distant screen, then wondered why he feels silent. Listen carefully. God is not out there. He was never in the sky, nor hidden behind stars. He is not a personality floating above creation, choosing favorites, blessing some and ignoring others. God is awareness itself, the awareness that says, I am. When you say, I am, you are calling his name. That is the eternal one. But man, not understanding this, personified that power and then made himself its servant. And so he lost his creative birthright. This is why I say to you, the jealous God of the Old Testament is not a cosmic tyrant, but the unawakened mind demanding recognition. The jealousy is not anger, it is law. It is the truth that consciousness alone creates, and will not allow you to serve two masters. You cannot believe both in an external power and in your own divinity. The moment you assign creation to something outside yourself, you deny your true nature as its source. And so long as man worships an external deity, he remains powerless. For what he worships as external, he unconsciously separates from himself. Think about it. How can you be like that which you believe is outside of you? How can you reflect God when you've placed him on a throne beyond reach? The answer is you can't. You only become what you worship when you realize the object of your worship is within. Let me tell you a story. A student once came to me, trembling under the weight of guilt. He said, Neville, I've prayed for years, but I feel unworthy. God doesn't hear me. I asked him, who is the one speaking to you now? He said, I am. And I said, then stop seeking God, you've just called his name. That moment shattered something in him. He saw that his constant prayers to the sky were the very reason he never heard an answer, because he was speaking to his own reflection and calling it other. The moment he turned inward and declared, I am heard, he was. That's the first awakening. To realize that the image of a faraway God is man's greatest limitation. The world's religions, though born from revelation, have hardened into habit. They taught you to look upward when you should have looked inward. They told you to seek heaven in death, when heaven has always been the consciousness of fulfillment here and now. That's why the Master said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. He wasn't giving poetry. He was describing the structure of reality. The idol in the sky keeps you powerless because it convinces you that creation is something done to you, not through you. As long as you beg, plead, or wait, you confess separation. But the moment you claim identity with the creative power within, the idol dissolves and true worship begins. For worship, in its highest form, is awareness, the awareness of being God. So here's what I want you to do tonight. Instead of speaking to God, speak as God. Don't say, please make this happen. Say, I am this already. Feel the shift. Feel how the words change your inner world. That is what it means to tear down the idol and reclaim the temple. And the temple, my friend, is not built of stone. It is the mind. It is your imagination, your awareness, your consciousness of being. When you stop bowing to the sky, you begin to feel that temple stir within you, a living, breathing sanctuary where the true Creator resides. And once you find him there, everything in your world begins to rearrange itself in perfect order. Because you see, the moment you withdraw your power from the illusion of separation, all the energy you once gave to fear and dependency returns to you as creative fire. And with that fire, you begin to shape your world deliberately, lovingly, as God intended. Now, stay with me, because once you see that the idol in the sky is only imagination forgotten, you'll want to know where the real God dwells and how to enter that inner kingdom where all things are possible. That is the next revelation, and we'll step into it now. There comes a moment when you can no longer bear to look upward for your answers. You've prayed, you've pleaded, you've searched the scriptures, you've stared into the night sky asking, where are you? And somewhere in the stillness between your words, a deeper voice whispers, I am right here. That whisper is not the voice of a distant deity, it is the voice of your own awareness, the one you've overlooked while searching for the divine. That, my friend, is the beginning of awakening, the moment you realize that the temple of God is not built of stone, not raised on any holy hill, not locked behind any ritual or creed. It is the imagination itself, the living kingdom within man. When I first heard the words of Scripture, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," I read them as a poet might, lovely, symbolic, but detached from reality. I thought heaven must still be somewhere beyond, a reward waiting after death, a paradise for the worthy. But when I began to apply imagination deliberately, when I tested it, when I felt inwardly the reality of my desires fulfilled, and watched the outer world bow to my inner conviction, I knew the verse was not poetry, it was law. Heaven is not a place, it is a state of consciousness. You enter it the moment you feel the truth of your assumption so deeply that you no longer need to see it to know it is real. Man has been taught to climb mountains and build cathedrals in search of God, but God is not found through pilgrimage, he is revealed through remembrance. Every journey outward is a delay. Every journey inward is discovery. When you close your eyes and begin to imagine, you are standing on holy ground. When you dare to feel yourself already the person you wish to be, you are kneeling before the altar of the Most High. For the altar is not made of marble, it is awareness itself. Imagine for a moment the world as you wish it to be. Not as you hope it might someday become, but as it already is in its completed perfection. Picture yourself standing in that world. See it clearly, touch it, breathe it, feel the atmosphere of it. Now realize this. What you just imagined is not fantasy. It is creation in its purest form. Imagination is the womb of the universe. It is the workshop where the formless becomes form. Everything you have ever seen, every invention, every home, every symphony began as a silent image in someone's mind. What is true of the artist is true of you, for you are the artist of your own life. Let me tell you a story that proved this to me beyond all question. Years ago, I longed to visit my family in Barbados, but had no means to go. The facts all said impossible. Yet I remembered what I had discovered, that imagination is reality and that God's dwelling is within. So I withdrew from the outer facts and I entered the inner kingdom. Each night I lay on my bed, closed my eyes and imagined myself in my father's house in Barbados. I felt the warm Caribbean air on my skin, the familiar smell of the sea, the laughter of my family around me. I let that feeling grow so real that I fell asleep in it. I didn't wish, I knew. Within a few weeks, through circumstances I could never have orchestrated, I was there in the very house I had imagined. The world rearranged itself to match the state I had accepted within. That is the kingdom in action. It is not found through effort, but through acceptance. You don't climb to it, you sink into it. You enter not by works, but by awareness. And once you taste it, you will never again look outside yourself for permission to create. The kingdom of God is imagination awakened. It is the power to say, "I am," and know that the words that follow will shape the world. Yet most people, even when they hear this, hesitate. They say, "Neville, are you telling me that my imagination is God?" I say yes, and you prove it every day. Think of the last time you feared something intensely. Perhaps you imagined the worst, saw it vividly in your mind, felt it as real. Did not your body react? Did not your heart race and your breath quicken? Nothing had happened in the outer world, and yet the inner image moved your entire being. That is the creative power in miniature. You are imagining all day long, and your world is the printout of those imaginal acts. So I tell you, stop praying to the heavens and start directing your imagination. Every scene you rehearse inwardly is a prayer. Every assumption you hold with feeling is a decree. You are the high priest of your inner temple, and every thought you offer there returns multiplied. The outer world cannot refuse what you've already accepted within. As within, so without is not philosophy, it is structure. The outer world is the shadow, imagination the substance. When you know this, life becomes a sacred adventure. You cease to beg, and begin to create. You stop asking, when will God answer? And realize that God already answered the moment you felt it real. You no longer fight the outer world. You shape it gently, inwardly, knowing that every circumstance bends to the pattern impressed upon consciousness. This is what it means to live from the kingdom, not toward it. So let this understanding settle deeply within you. Heaven is not coming. Heaven is not waiting. Heaven is consciousness fulfilled. And when you rest in that awareness, when you make imagination your dwelling place, the outer world must follow as faithfully as day follows night. But once you discover this kingdom, another question naturally arises. How does it all work? What is the mechanism by which this invisible world of imagination becomes visible as flesh and circumstance? How does the unseen I am translate itself into the tangible? To answer that, we must look at the mirror of consciousness itself, the divine reflector that reveals whatever image you hold before it. And that, my friend, is where we are going next. When I speak of the mirror of consciousness, I speak of a mystery so simple that the intellect overlooks it, yet so absolute that it governs the destiny of every man who walks this earth. Everything you behold outside yourself is but the reflection of what you believe within yourself. The entire world, from the most intimate encounter to the furthest star, is a mirror held before your consciousness, showing you not what you wish were true, but what you assume is true. This is why men curse the world, yet never change it. They stand before the mirror frowning, demanding it smile back. They pray for peace while sowing fear within, and then call the harvest fate. They cry, God has forsaken me, not realizing it is their own belief in separation that casts the shadow. When you begin to see this, life rearranges itself before your eyes. You stop blaming others, for there are no others. You stop condemning circumstance, for circumstance is the echo of your own inner state. The mirror of consciousness does not judge. It simply reflects. It does not decide. It reveals. Whatever image you impress upon it through thought, feeling, and belief, it projects outward into the world of form. This is the true meaning of creation, and it happens ceaselessly, moment by moment. You can no more stop imagining than you can stop being. The question is not whether you create, but whether you do so knowingly or in ignorance. I remember once speaking with a man who told me, Neville, my life is proof that the law doesn't work. I believed in good, but only trouble follows me. I said to him, my friend, you do not attract what you say, you attract what you are. You speak of good, but what do you feel when you are alone? He confessed that he lived in quiet dread, always expecting the next difficulty. I told him, then you are not believing in good, you are believing in fear. Your words are one prayer, but your feelings are another, and the universe answers the louder voice. That is how the mirror works. It reflects the vibration of your dominant assumption, not the fleeting wish of the surface mind. You see, the subconscious mind, the womb of creation, hears not the words you speak, but the tone you live in. It responds not to the intellect, but to the imagination, not to logic, but to belief. You may recite 1,000 affirmations, but if beneath them runs a river of doubt, that is the image impressed upon the mirror. When your heart and your head disagree, the heart always wins. For feeling is the language of God. The world will mirror back to you not your intentions, but your convictions. So I ask you now, what image are you showing the mirror? When you look upon your life, are you seeing a God of judgment or a God of creation? Are you living as one who is loved or as one who must earn love? Are you seeing a world of lack or a world overflowing with abundance? Whatever you behold without is the photograph of your belief within. Change the film, and the picture must change. The mirror cannot reflect what you have not already imagined. This is why the Master said, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. The heart in Scripture does not mean emotion alone. It means the core of being, the center of belief. You think in your heart when an idea has descended from thought into feeling. That is when it becomes creative. And the world, being nothing but your heart turned outward, will always echo that vibration. I once met a woman who struggled with loneliness. She said, "Neville, I pray every night for love, yet no one comes." I asked her, "When you pray, what do you feel?" She said, "I feel the ache of being alone." And I told her, "Then you are not praying for love, you are praying for loneliness. You are magnifying the very state you wish to escape." I asked her instead to imagine that she already was loved, to feel the joy of companionship, the security of being cherished, until that feeling became natural. She did this faithfully for weeks. One day, while out walking, she met a man who seemed to appear from nowhere, a man who matched the very qualities she had imagined. They later married, and she wrote to me, saying, "It happened exactly as I felt it." The mirror of consciousness had simply reflected the new image she impressed upon it. And so I tell you, stop trying to change the reflection. The world outside is a shadow, a mirage cast by your inner state. You cannot wipe away the image on the glass. You must alter the face that stands before it. When you grasp this, you'll understand why effort often fails. It is not what you do, but what you are that speaks creation into being. Change the assumption that underlies your actions, and the actions themselves will bear new fruit. Think of your consciousness as light, and the world as the surface upon which it shines. If the light is tinted red, everything appears red. You can scrub the wall forever, but until you change the light, the redness remains. So it is with life. You may rearrange circumstances endlessly, but if your inner light is colored by fear, doubt, or lack, the outer scene can only echo it. Change the light, change the assumption, and the world must follow. This mirror of consciousness is not cruel. It does not punish. It educates. Every reflection you see is an invitation to self-awareness. The difficulties you face are not curses, but clues, mirrors, showing you where you still believe in separation. When you meet cruelty, it is the echo of your own unhealed judgment. When you face limitation, it is your own forgotten faith made visible. But when you meet love, when you encounter abundance, when life unfolds with ease, know that these too are mirrors, reflections of your remembrance of God within. And once you know this law, you are free. For now, you can choose deliberately what you wish the mirror to show. You can decide to see the world as friendly, to feel yourself as loved, to know yourself as powerful. You no longer fear appearances, because you recognize them as temporary reflections of your own evolving state. And as your inner state rises, your world rises with it. Now, let me leave you with this thought. Every moment is a mirror. Every face you meet, every event, every mood is the reflection of your own consciousness projected outward. So treat the world as you would your own reflection. Love it, forgive it, and watch it change. For the world is yourself made visible. The mirror answers your assumption always and exactly. And if you wish to change the reflection, there is but one way. You must change the name by which you call God. You must stop saying He and begin to say I am. For the moment you do, you cease to live as the reflection and begin to live as the light itself. And that is where we will go next, into the great revelation of the divine name, the secret Moses heard from the burning bush, the eternal command hidden within two words, I am. For when you understand that name, you hold the key to every door, and the mirror will show you only glory. Here is something sacred, something older than any scripture, something so simple that the learned overlooked it and the humble have whispered it unknowingly every day of their lives. The name of God, the eternal I am. This is not a name given by man, not written in stone or bound to any tongue. It is the living identity of being itself. It is the soundless vibration that speaks before any word, the pulse that beats before any heart begins to move. It is the first awareness that ever was, the awareness that says simply, I am. Long before you called yourself by any name, before you were father, mother, student, worker, before you said I am this or I am that, there was the pure knowing I am. That is God. All else is commentary. All else is the garment the eternal wears to reveal himself in time. The story of Moses standing before the burning bush is not history, it is your story. Moses represents your awakened imagination, and the burning bush is the fire of consciousness itself. And the voice that speaks from that fire says, I am that I am. Not I was, not I will be, but I am. In those two words, the whole secret of creation rests. The name of God was never meant to be worshipped. It was meant to be realized. It was not meant to inspire reverence at a distance, but recognition within. When you say, I am, you call upon the power that created the universe. You invoke the same creative force that said, let there be light. But man, fearing responsibility, hid this truth from himself. He covered the divine name with doctrines, concealed it behind rituals, and veiled it in mystery. The Hebrews guarded the Tetragrammaton, the four sacred letters, YHWH, thinking the holiness lay in the sound, when in truth it lay in the consciousness it described. Yod He Vav. He is not pronunciation. It is a formula. It represents the process of creation, the seed of intention, the conception of feeling, the joining of thought and emotion, and the manifestation of form. It was never a word to be spoken aloud. It was a state to be entered, a living rhythm of being. But man turned it into superstition. He feared the very power meant to set him free. I once knew a man who would never speak the name of God. He said, it is too holy to utter. And I told him, then you have been uttering it all your life. Every time you say, I am, you call his name. Every time you declare anything about yourself, you speak the creative word. He looked at me in disbelief. I asked him, when you say I am tired, who is tired? When you say I am happy, who is happy? The name has never left your lips. You have simply used it ignorantly. That is what it means to take the Lord's name in vain, not to curse with vulgarity, but to declare I am, followed by words of limitation. To say I am sick, I am poor, I am unworthy, is to attach the creative power of the infinite to the pattern of bondage. The sin is not in the sound. It is in the assumption. You see, the name I am is the doorway through which the unseen becomes seen. Every time you say those words, you are setting creation in motion. The rest of the sentence that follows is the mold, and your feeling while saying it is the fire that hardens it into fact. The outer world then crystallizes around that inner decree. The subconscious hears your every I am and takes it as law. You are using this power constantly, consciously or unconsciously, and your life is the sum of your I ams made visible. Think of the child learning to speak. The first words he utters are not about others, they are about himself. I am hungry. I am tired. I am happy. In that innocent repetition lies the secret of all creation. The child has not yet been taught fear or limitation, so his words are pure, spontaneous, creative. As we grow older, we layer those simple declarations with doubt. We learn to say, I am not enough. I am trying. I am waiting. And the law, unchanging and impersonal, mirrors those statements back to us as reality. For the creative word does not judge, it fulfills. So tonight, I want you to become aware of how you use the divine name. Listen to your own inner speech. Catch the unconscious declarations you make. You may not realize how often you affirm your own limitations. I am exhausted. I am unlucky. I am afraid. Every one of these is a command to the subconscious, a creative act spoken in ignorance. The law hears, the mirror reflects, and the world obeys. But the same law that binds can also set free. Begin now to speak differently. Declare only what you wish to see made flesh. I am blessed. I am guided. I am free. Say these not as hopeful affirmations, but as living facts. Feel them as real. For the moment you do, they begin to take shape in your world. You must understand that the creative name is not confined to speech alone. It is the silent awareness of being. Even when you say nothing, the unspoken I am continues to create through the tone of your inner state. If you walk through life feeling small, unseen, forgotten, that is your unspoken prayer, and it will be answered faithfully. But if you carry yourself with the quiet assurance that you are the embodiment of divine consciousness, the world will mirror that awareness back in form, opportunity, and respect. The forgotten name must be remembered not as a word but as an experience. To awaken to I am is to awaken to the truth that there is no power outside of consciousness. Everything you see is consciousness conditioned by your assumptions. Everything you desire already exists within that infinite awareness, waiting for you to claim it. The moment you say, I am that, you unite yourself with the thing desired, and it begins its journey from imagination to visibility. So I say to you, stop waiting for a miracle. Speak the name consciously. Feel its power move through you. Declare within yourself, I am the resurrection and the life of everything I desire to see. Say it not as imitation but as realization. You are the one who gives that name meaning. When you finally know this, when you understand that every I am is a brushstroke painting your world, the forgotten name becomes the living word again. And from that moment, creation no longer feels like effort, it feels like breathing. You will see that the same power that moves the stars moves through your own being. You will realize that every time you declare yourself to be something, heaven listens and responds, so be it. That is the true relationship between man and God, not supplication, but identity. Now, once you remember the name, once you dare to speak it consciously, the next step is learning how to speak as God, not to Him to pray, not from lack, but from fulfillment, to command creation, not by pleading, but by knowing. That is the next revelation. And it changes everything about the way you approach life, prayer, and manifestation. Let us go there now, into the living art of speaking as the I am. When you begin to speak as God, you stop asking and start declaring. You cease your pleading, your bargaining, your restless attempts to persuade an external power, because you finally know that the power you once prayed to is the very breath moving through you now. The moment this awareness takes root in you, everything changes. The tone of your inner speech, the way you walk through the world, even the rhythm of your thoughts. For to speak as God is to speak from the end, to occupy the state of fulfillment so completely that desire dissolves into knowing. The prayer of asking becomes the decree of being. You no longer say, please let this happen, but rather, it is finished. You see, true prayer is not supplication, it is identification. Every request that begins with God, will you, contains the hidden confession, I am not. It reinforces separation. But when you stand within the feeling of already being what you seek, you collapse that distance. You merge the seeker and the sought, and creation must obey. For God's creative act is always performed through assumption, never through effort. The scriptures record that after each act of creation, God saw that it was good. That seeing is not observation, it is acceptance. It is the calm satisfaction of consciousness resting in its completed work. That is the posture you must learn to assume. When I discovered this truth, my entire understanding of prayer changed. I stopped speaking to the sky and began speaking from the heavens within. I no longer treated prayer as communication with another being, but as communion with myself. I learned to say, I am heard because I am the one who hears. I am supplied because I am the source from which supply flows. In those moments, prayer was no longer an act, it was a state. It was the still assurance that whatever I felt in consciousness must manifest, not because of magic, but because consciousness is the only reality. I remember one evening when this realization became unshakable in me. I was lecturing in Los Angeles, and a man came up after the meeting, desperate. His family was on the verge of eviction, his savings gone, his confidence broken. He said, Neville, I prayed for help, but nothing happens. I told him, you're praying to a God who cannot hear you, because he is not other than you. You must speak as though the thing were already done. He looked at me confused, so I said, go home tonight and enter the feeling that your family is secure. Don't imagine the process, imagine the result. Feel the joy of telling them it's all taken care of. Fall asleep in that feeling. He did. 2 days later, he returned, astonished. A business deal he thought dead for months had revived, and the money he needed came easily. He asked, how did it happen? I said, it happened the moment you prayed as God, not to him. You see, the secret is in the tone of your inner speech. To speak as God You must remove every trace of doubt. You must feel the reality of your word as unshakably as if it were already carved in stone. When I say feel, I do not mean emotion, I mean conviction. The feeling of fulfillment is not excitement, it is calm, quiet certainty. When you stand in that stillness, the world begins to reorganize itself around your decree. Events, people, and circumstances start to align in ways you could not have orchestrated, for creation answers conviction, not repetition. When the scriptures say, "Let the weak say, I am strong," they do not mean pretend, they mean declare. The act of saying I am strong from the feeling of strength is not self-deception, it is self-definition. You are naming yourself in consciousness, and the name you give must become flesh. It may seem arrogant to speak this way, but arrogance belongs only to those who claim power apart from God. To speak as God is the most humble act of all, for you acknowledge that there is no power but the I am, and that power operates only through you. Think of creation like a mirror. It does not reflect your words, it reflects your assumption. You may shout affirmations into the air, but if within you the tone is fear, the echo will return as fear. But if you whisper one word from the depth of conviction, the entire universe bends to it. The volume of your speech is irrelevant. It is the belief behind it that commands reality. When you say, I am free, and feel the peace of freedom flood your being, the mirror cannot help but reflect it. The outer world may take time to catch up, but the law is already fulfilled. When I teach this, people often ask, Neville, what if I don't believe it yet? And I tell them, then persist until the feeling becomes natural. You are not trying to convince a distant deity. You are conditioning your own subconscious, the creative womb of God. It hears only feeling, and feeling is the secret. If you can sustain the inner tone of being the thing desired, creation is inevitable. There's a sacred moment that happens when you stop asking how, and simply rest in, it is done. You can feel the shift in your body, a loosening, a soft exhale, the sense that something has already moved. That is faith. Faith is not struggle. It is surrender to the completed work. It is the quiet confidence that the word has gone forth and will not return void. And when you reach that stillness, you discover what the prophets meant by peace be still. They were not commanding the storm outside, but the turbulence within. Let me tell you this plainly. You are not waiting for your desire to appear. Your desire is waiting for you to assume it. The moment you do, the process begins. Your work is not to make it happen, but to maintain the inner knowing that it has already happened. That is the true Sabbath, resting in the finished work of your own assumption. This is why the Master could stand before the tomb of Lazarus and say, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, even before any sign of life appeared. He was not hoping, he was knowing. The same power that raised Lazarus lives in you, waiting to be spoken. When you declare from fulfillment, the dead facts of your world awaken. So tonight, practice this. Whatever you desire, freedom, love, abundance, withdraw into silence and declare, I am that. Say it gently, but mean it absolutely. Feel the word I am expand within you like light filling a room. Let that light swallow up the old identity. Do not beg, do not reason, do not doubt, just rest in that feeling. And when you rise from that stillness, carry yourself as one who has already received. The world will soon catch the scent of your new vibration and deliver the outer reflection accordingly. Now, having spoken as God, there remains one final key to understand the mechanism by which these declarations take form in the physical world. For your words are seeds, and every seed requires the right soil, temperature, and silence to grow. This process of manifestation, the unseen bridge from assumption to fact, is governed by one principle alone, the law of assumption. Let us move now into that sacred understanding, where the invisible becomes visible and the word becomes flesh. Now that you understand that the words I am are not sounds but states of being, we can step into the holy science by which the unseen becomes seen, the law of assumption. This law is simple, yet it is the foundation of all creation, and it is the secret behind every miracle that man has ever attributed to divine intervention. It declares that whatever you assume to be true in imagination and feel as real in consciousness must manifest itself in your outer world. It is not a suggestion or a hopeful philosophy, it is a law as certain as gravity. The entire universe, with its infinite complexity and rhythm, bends obediently to the tones of man's inner feeling. You assume, and the world rearranges itself. You feel, and the mirror of creation reflects. Every event in your life, the joyful and the sorrowful, the desirable and the painful, has arisen from an assumption you once entertained, often without realizing it. This is the great responsibility of consciousness, that you cannot stop imagining. Even your disbelief is an assumption. The outer world is not happening to you, it is happening through you. You are the projector, and life is the screen. Change the film within, and the picture must change without. To argue with circumstances is to argue with your own shadow. The world is a faithful servant. It has no power to resist the hand that molds it. When you begin to use this law deliberately, you cease to live as a victim of chance. You stop asking why life happens to you and begin to see that it happens because of you. You realize that creation does not begin with action but with assumption. It is not effort that moves the mountains of your life, it is feeling. You may work, plan, and strive, but until your inner state matches your desire, you labor in vain. The work is not to force the outer but to persuade the inner. You must convince yourself of the truth you wish to see reflected. There was once a woman who wrote to me, tormented by loneliness. She said, "Neville, I have tried every method of prayer, yet nothing changes." I asked her, "When you pray, what do you assume?" She said, "I assume that I am alone and that God will someday send someone." I said, "Then you have built the wall you're trying to climb. You assume separation and pray for union. The law cannot contradict itself. You must assume that you are already loved, already chosen, already in the company of your desire." I told her to close her eyes each night and feel the warmth of love surrounding her, not to imagine a specific face, but to feel the joy of companionship as if it were already hers. Within weeks, she wrote again. A man she had known casually for years had suddenly confessed his affection for her, and what had seemed impossible became her daily reality. That is the law in action. It is impartial, exact, and generous. It gives to every man according to his assumption, whether he believes in the law or not. You can use it consciously to create heaven or unconsciously to sustain hell. It does not discriminate. The moment you assume a state and feel it real, it begins to unfold itself through the chain of natural events. And those events may appear coincidental, but they are not. They are the outpicturing of your inner word. The world calls this coincidence or luck, but there is no luck in a universe ruled by consciousness. What you call fortune is simply faith matured. What you call misfortune is faith misplaced. Every time you repeat to yourself, "I never get what I want," or "things always go wrong," you have spoken your command to the law, and it obeys. It is not personal. It is procedural. The law does not punish. It fulfills. That is why the Master said, "According to your faith, be it done unto you." Faith is not blind belief. It is the assumption that something is true, and feeling it as real until it becomes fact. The key to using this law lies in a sacred state called the state akin to sleep, that twilight between waking and dreaming, when the conscious mind grows still and the subconscious becomes receptive. In that quiet, you can plant your assumption without resistance. You do not force the image. You feel it. You do not argue with facts. You transcend them. You picture yourself already being, having, or doing the thing desired, and you sink into the satisfaction of it. You let sleep come upon that feeling, and when you awaken, the seed has been sown. You may forget the act consciously, but the subconscious never does. It begins to build the bridge of incidents that will carry you naturally into the fulfillment of your assumption. Let me explain this bridge. The law of assumption does not need your manipulation, it needs your trust. Once you have planted the seed, life arranges the perfect sequence of events to bring it forth. These events may not look related. They may even appear as obstacles. But if you remain faithful to your assumption, you will see that every apparent detour was part of the divine route. The law operates in perfect order, and nothing is wasted. The moment you declare, "I am," the invisible gears of creation begin to turn. There will be times when appearances seem to contradict your inner knowing. In those moments, you must remember that the world is lagging light. It takes time for the outer to reflect the inner. Do not be fooled by the delay. The seed does not doubt itself while it is buried in the soil. It does not cry out, "Where is the tree?" It simply grows in silence, confident in its purpose. You must do the same. When you assume the state of your desire and feel it real, rest. Do not dig up the seed to check its progress. Do not plead for reassurance. The law is absolute. Your assumption, once felt, is a decree, and nothing in heaven or earth can prevent its manifestation except your own disbelief. I tell you now, the greatest act of faith is not effort but rest, resting in the knowledge that the creative act is finished. The moment you feel it, it is done. The outer manifestation is simply the shadow catching up to the light. Learn to walk by faith and not by sight, and you will know what it means to live as God. For God himself creates by assumption. He speaks the word and rests, knowing it cannot fail. When he said, "Let there be light," he did not wait for proof. He declared it finished and beheld its reflection. That same power, that same law, operates through you. So tonight, practice the law consciously. Close your eyes and choose a desire, not as a beggar asking for alms, but as a creator choosing a new form of expression. Say to yourself, "I am that." Feel it as done. Let the feeling saturate your being until it becomes more real than the world around you. Then go about your day quietly, knowing that creation is underway. Resist the urge to interfere, to question, to doubt. Simply remember, assumption hardens into fact. And as you live this way, something wonderful happens. You begin to see that all things are truly one, that there is no division between the inner and the outer, the seen and the unseen. You begin to live in a world of divine correspondence, where thought becomes thing, where prayer becomes presence, where imagination and reality are revealed as the same substance at different speeds. That is when you understand that the words "I am" are not merely a name, they are the law itself, written in the heart of man. Now, having understood how the unseen takes form, we must look deeper still into the nature of the law's operation, not as a mechanical process, but as a divine order governed by intelligence and love. For while the law is exact, it is also merciful. It is not blind machinery. It is living spirit. It is the mind of God moving through the heart of man. To know this is to see that God is not chance or luck. He is law. He is the perfect impartial order behind all things. Let us turn to that revelation next and see how understanding God as law frees you from superstition and awakens you to mastery. Here is a truth that startles the unawakened mind. God is not a person making moral judgments about the good and the bad. God is law. He is not a being who decides what you deserve. He is the principle by which every assumption becomes reality. He does not choose who shall rise and who shall fall. He simply reflects the inner pattern held within consciousness. The universe, like a perfectly balanced scale, returns to every man exactly what he believes of himself. It does not favor the saint over the sinner, nor the strong over the weak. It mirrors the state, not the statement. It answers not the prayer of the lips, but the feeling of the heart. When you grasp this, you no longer live in superstition or fear. You awaken into mastery. For ages, men have prayed to God as if he were a ruler with moods and preferences, dispensing blessings to the worthy and curses to the defiant. They have imagined him offended by failure, pleased by obedience, swayed by praise. But law has no moods, no caprice, no emotion. Fire does not burn because it loves you, nor refuse to burn because it pities you. It simply acts in harmony with its nature. The creative law of consciousness is the same. it will manifest the image impressed upon it, whether that image be one of joy or sorrow, wealth or want. This is not cruelty, it is divine justice. It is the order that makes creation stable, predictable, dependable. Without it, the universe would collapse into chaos. I once spoke to a man who said, "Neville, if this law is true, why do good people suffer and wicked people prosper?" And I told him, because the law does not deal in morality, it deals in imagination. It creates according to faith, not behavior. A man may live outwardly noble and yet inwardly dwell in fear, and his world will mirror fear. Another may act with greed but imagine abundance and so find it. The law does not punish, it fulfills. But understand this, the fulfillment of an ungodly imagination eventually turns upon itself, for God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth in consciousness, that shall he also reap. Sooner or later, even the one who misuses the law will awaken, for the law leads all to self-recognition. This truth frightened me at first, because it removed every excuse I had ever used to explain away my failures. I could no longer blame the world, luck, or circumstance. I had to face the fact that I am the cause of everything in my life. But that moment of terror gave birth to freedom. If I am the cause, then I am also the cure. If I have imagined myself into bondage, I can imagine myself into liberty. That is what the scriptures mean when they say, "With God all things are possible." For God is your imagination, and nothing is beyond imagination. You may ask, "But Neville, isn't this dangerous? Doesn't it make man lawless if God is not a moral judge?" On the contrary, when you understand that every thought returns to you multiplied, you become more careful, more loving, more deliberate than any commandment could compel you to be. The fear of punishment never made man holy. Only the understanding of law can make him wise. You realize that to imagine harm for another is to invite that harm upon yourself, for there is only one consciousness. You understand that to condemn is to create the experience of condemnation. You see that love is not a virtue you perform, but a law you fulfill. Think of the Sunday. It shines on the righteous and the unrighteous alike, not because it chooses, but because it is its nature to shine. The light does not pause to consider who deserves warmth. It gives freely, impersonally, perfectly. So too is God as law. The light of consciousness shines through every being, expressing whatever form each one chooses to assume. You can turn your back on the light and call it darkness, but the light is unchanged. It does not withdraw. It awaits recognition. This is the justice of heaven, impartial, consistent, absolute. When you understand this, fear leaves you. You stop trying to please God and begin to align with God. You no longer ask, "Will He grant my wish?" You ask instead, "Am I in harmony with the law that creates?" You cease to measure your worth by the opinions of men, for you know that every man is only a projection of your own state of consciousness. You no longer fear sin, for sin is not disobedience, it is forgetfulness. The only sin in the world is to forget who you are, and the only punishment is the experience that comes from that forgetfulness. Let me share an image that may help you see it clearly. Imagine that you are standing before a river, and you drop into it a small boat. That river represents consciousness. Whatever direction you set your boat to flow, the river will carry it faithfully. It does not ask whether the journey is wise or foolish, whether it leads to joy or ruin. It simply flows, obedient to your intention. Now imagine that you steer your boat toward fear, lack, resentment, or guilt. The river will take you there swiftly, not because it condemns you, but because it cannot contradict your command. But if you turn the rudder toward peace, faith, and abundance, it carries you just as faithfully to that destination. Such is the nature of God as law. I tell you this so that you may stop blaming God for your misfortunes. He does not withhold blessings, nor does he inflict pain. The law gives form to your feeling, and the world bears witness to your faith. If your life displeases you, the remedy lies not in heaven's favor, but in your own imagination. Start imagining differently, and the outer will follow. That is repentance in its truest sense, a radical change of mind. So when you hear that God is no respecter of persons, rejoice. It means no one is excluded from the promise. The law does not recognize birth, status, or circumstance. The pauper and the prince stand equal before it. It does not respond to titles or prayers, but to states of consciousness. To assume a state and feel it real is to command creation itself. To refuse that responsibility is to live in superstition. This realization brings you face to face with divine accountability. You can no longer hide behind the myth of luck or the illusion of injustice. You understand that your life is not governed by chance but by correspondence, that every experience, whether you call it good or evil, is your own creation returning to you. But in this very recognition lies power beyond measure, for you can now take the reins of imagination and steer the course of your destiny. And once you begin to see the order and precision of this law, your questions about luck, fate, and morality dissolve. You see that everything unfolds by law, and that what you once called random is simply the mathematics of consciousness, invisible to the eye but perfect in its design. From this place of understanding, life stops being a trial and becomes a revelation. You begin to trust the process, even when you cannot yet see its end. You begin to say, I know my assumption is true, and in due season it shall appear. So now that we have seen God as law, not as moral authority, but as impersonal principle, let us look closer at how that law operates in the details of your life. Let us examine how every so-called accident, coincidence, or twist of fate is but the effect of an imaginal cause. Let us see how there is no such thing as chance, only consciousness unfolding. For once you understand that God is cause, not caprice, you will never again fear the future. Everything that appears in your world, everything you experience, from the smallest conversation to the greatest turning point of your life, is the direct result of an imaginal cause. Nothing happens by accident. There is no such thing as luck, fate, or coincidence. These are names man gives to effects whose causes he has forgotten. The principle is absolute. Consciousness is the only reality, and what you are conscious of being, you inevitably become. The law does not deal in chance, it deals in correspondence. Every outer event is the echo of an inner act. Every condition is a mirror reflecting the assumption that gave it birth. The universe does not roll dice. It obeys the pattern of belief that you hold as true in the depth of your being. When this truth first dawns upon a man, it can humble him to the point of tears. For he sees that his joys and his sorrows, his triumphs and his failures, were not accidents of fortune, but creations of his own inner life. And though at first this realization may sting, it quickly gives way to the sweetest freedom imaginable, the freedom to choose again. If your imagination is the cause, then you are never a victim of circumstance. You are never bound by your past, never held by the hand of destiny. You can revise, reshape, and redeem your life at any moment, simply by assuming a new state of consciousness. This is the power behind the teaching I have called revision. It is the art of changing the imaginal cause so that the outer effect must also change. The past, you see, is not fixed in the way you think it is. It lives only as a pattern in consciousness, and consciousness, being eternal and fluid, can be rewritten at will. You may believe that what is done cannot be undone, that events are solid and unchangeable, but the outer world is only the crystallized shadow of inner activity. Change the inner pattern, and the outer must rearrange to match it, even if it means altering what you once called the past. I remember vividly the night I discovered this. I had quarreled with a man I loved dearly, and we parted in anger. For days, I replayed the scene in my mind, justifying myself, blaming him, nursing the wound. Then one evening, as I lay upon my bed, something within whispered, "Change it." I closed my eyes and imagined the same conversation, but this time it ended in kindness. I heard his voice speak words of reconciliation, felt the warmth of his hand in mine, saw his smile, and felt love replace the bitterness. I fell asleep in that feeling of harmony. The next day, he appeared at my door, not to argue, but to embrace me. The facts of the past had rearranged themselves. The letter had been rewritten in spirit, and so it became history. The world may call this miracle or coincidence, but I tell you, it is law. You cannot escape the creative power of imagination. You can only use it wisely or foolishly. What you believe to be true about yourself is the seed from which every event grows. Some seeds blossom swiftly, others lie dormant until nourished by attention, but none are lost, and all in their appointed time bear fruit. To imagine an undesirable event and then fear it is to water the seed of your own suffering. To imagine love, peace, and abundance, and feel them real, is to plant heaven in the soil of consciousness. So I ask you now to look at your life as it stands. Do you see disorder? Begin to trace it back to the assumption that sustains it. Perhaps you hold the belief that life is hard, that success is for others, that love is fleeting, that the world is indifferent. These are not facts. They are assumptions. They may have been taught to you since childhood, whispered to you by parents, teachers, and the latest media. But they are still only beliefs, and beliefs can be changed. The law will never oppose your freedom. The moment you assume a new cause, a new effect must follow. Let me tell you the story of a woman who once came to me after a lecture in New York. She had lost her job and said, "Neville, I've sent out countless applications, but no one replies. I think fate is against me." I told her, "Fate is nothing but imagination misunderstood. You've assumed rejection, and the world obeys that assumption. Stop trying to change the facts, change the cause." I asked her to go home, close her eyes, and imagine herself employed, busy, productive, happy in her work. Not to imagine the process, but the result, the end. I told her to feel the relief of knowing that the search was over. Within 10 days, she wrote to me. A company that had ignored her months earlier suddenly called, offering her a position with better pay than she had lost. Was it coincidence? No, it was law. The outer world had aligned with her new assumption. You see, the law is exact, but it is also merciful. It does not hold grudges. The moment you change your assumption, it begins to move the universe to match it. The bridge of incidents will unfold. Events will link together, people will appear, doors will open, all leading you gently, naturally, to the fulfillment of your word. The path may not be what you expected, but it will be perfect. Trust the bridge and walk across it in faith. Now, many people ask me, "Neville, how can I know when my assumption has taken root?" And I tell them, when you can rest. When the desire no longer feels like something to reach for, but something to express. When the thought of it brings not longing but quiet satisfaction. When the inner argument ceases, and you can say with calm certainty, "It is finished," then you have sown the seed. From that moment, the result is as certain as sunrise. The delay between assumption and manifestation is the season of gestation, the invisible work of law, turning spirit into flesh. The wise do not rush this process. They do not dig up the seed to check if it has sprouted. They trust the order of life. They know that the harvest is inevitable, and they cultivate patience as the companion of faith. For patience is not waiting in anxiety, it is resting in assurance. It is the still knowing that the unseen cause is already fulfilled, and time is simply the shadow catching up to light. When you live by this understanding, fear vanishes. You no longer worry about what tomorrow may bring, for tomorrow is born today in imagination. You no longer resent others' success, for you know that their good is proof of the same law working through them. You no longer speak of luck, for you have seen behind the veil, and what you find there is not randomness, but perfect correspondence. So tonight, as you lie down to sleep, remember this. Nothing can come to you except what you have called with your own consciousness. Change the cause, and you change the effect. The outer world is the frozen music of your inner song. Sing a new melody, and the world will dance to its rhythm. Speak a new name, and creation will reshape itself around that sound. But to live by this law requires discipline. It requires the ability to hold a new assumption steady in the face of contradiction, to persist in the unseen until it hardens into the visible. That discipline is the mark of the awakened man. the one who no longer lives as a leaf in the wind, but as the wind itself. So let us now turn to that mastery, the art of controlled imagination, where you will learn to direct your creative power consciously, deliberately, joyfully, until every word of your inner speech becomes a song of fulfillment. To live as a creator in this world, you must learn the art of controlled imagination. For imagination uncontrolled is the root of all chaos, while imagination disciplined is heaven itself. Most men drift through life as sleepwalkers in their own creation, moved by the waves of old assumptions, repeating the same patterns because they have never learned that their imagination is the steering wheel of destiny. They believe life happens to them, not through them, and so they drift in the tide of inherited belief, hoping for mercy from a God they think is outside themselves. But you, once awakened, can never go back to such blindness. You now know that imagination is not idle, daydreaming. It is the secret workshop of creation. It is the womb where all reality is conceived. Every act of faith, every inner conversation, every vision felt as real is a seed cast into the infinite soil of the subconscious, and that soil knows only one response: to bring forth according to the pattern impressed upon it. The unawakened man uses imagination against himself. He imagines fear and wonders why he lives in anxiety. He imagines failure and calls it bad luck. He relives painful memories and calls it reality. He speaks in bitterness about the past and projects those words forward as prophecy. All of this is creation, though he does it in ignorance. He prays for change while rehearsing the same inner pictures that produced his bondage. He says, "I can't help what I feel," not realizing that feeling is precisely the power by which he helps or hinders himself. But when a man learns to control imagination, to govern the inner world of thought and emotion as a king governs his kingdom, then he discovers that there is no external tyranny that can hold him. He sees that the world is plastic to his inner vision, responsive to his command, obedient to his word. This control is not achieved by force, but by direction. You do not suppress imagination, you guide it. You do not fight thought, you redirect it. Every time you notice yourself imagining what you do not wish to live, you turn gently to the image you prefer and dwell there instead. It is like training the wild horse of your mind to move with grace rather than chaos. At first it resists, because it has grown accustomed to roaming wherever fear or habit leads. But as you persist, you discover a stillness, a rhythm, a poise that makes creation effortless. This is the mastery Christ demonstrated when he said, "Whatsoever things ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye have received them, and ye shall have them." He was describing controlled imagination, the ability to assume the end and rest there, unmoved by the evidence of the senses. You see, imagination is the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the eternal and the temporal, the unseen cause and the seen effect. It is not fantasy or wishful thinking. Fantasy remains impotent because it lacks feeling. It is a detached thought with no life in it. But controlled imagination unites vision with emotion. It clothes the invisible in substance. When you imagine something and feel it as though it were already true, you have entered into its reality. The law has accepted your word, and creation begins immediately. It must, for consciousness cannot deny itself. There is a practice I have taught countless times, one that will reveal to you the living power of imagination beyond all theory. Each night, as you lie upon your bed, enter what I call the state akin to sleep. This is the borderland between wakefulness and slumber, that sacred twilight when the mind grows quiet and the gate to the subconscious stands open. In that stillness, imagine a scene that would imply your desire is already fulfilled. If you seek freedom, imagine yourself rejoicing in it. If you seek healing, imagine yourself radiant with vitality. If you seek love, imagine the warmth of companionship. Make the scene vivid but simple. Do not strain, do not force detail. Feel it natural, effortless, alive. Let the joy of fulfillment flood your being until you forget that it is imagination at all. And as you drift into sleep, carry that feeling with you, for the subconscious, like a faithful servant, takes whatever impression dominates your last waking moments and reproduces it in form. You may awaken the next morning and see nothing changed, but do not be deceived. The law is already at work. Your inner act has set in motion the bridge of incidents that will carry you to your result. You do not need to orchestrate it. You need only remain faithful to the end. The imagination you practiced last night is the seed, and time is the womb. Do not dig up the seed to check if it grows. Continue each night until it feels real, not as an effort, but as a joy. And when it finally does feel natural, cease the exercise. For that which has been accepted by the subconscious will now externalize itself inevitably. Once this becomes your way of life, you will see that prayer and imagination are one. Every inner conversation is prayer. Every mental rehearsal is prophecy. Every mood you sustain is creation. Controlled imagination is not limited to formal meditation. It is the constant awareness of what you are entertaining in mind throughout the day. The moment you catch yourself rehearsing fear, stop and say within, "That is not my truth. I am imagining better." Replace it instantly with a scene that reflects your chosen state. Do this again and again until it becomes natural. The more faithfully you practice this redirection, the more quickly your world will transform. I remember once a student asked me, "Neville, do I have to imagine every detail? What if I miss something?" I told him, "You are not the architect of the bridge, you are the author of the end. The law will fill in every detail perfectly once you fix the goal. Don't imagine the means, imagine the result." That is the essence of controlled imagination, to hold the end steady and let the wisdom of the law determine how it comes to pass. The outer world knows how to serve the inner command better than your conscious mind ever could. And if ever you doubt, recall this truth. The world you see is the mirror of imagination already crystallized. Everything that surrounds you was once an invisible assumption in someone's mind. The chair you sit on, the building you live in, the city skyline, all were first imagined. The only difference between the architect who designs a cathedral and the beggar who repeats his misery is the direction of imagination. One uses it consciously, the other unconsciously. The power is the same. The result differs. So I say to you now, take hold of this power and use it with love. Do not use it to dominate others, for there are no others. Do not use it to prove your strength, for imagination is not a weapon but a womb. Use it to bless, to uplift, to reveal the beauty that already lies within you. For every act of imagination is a seed cast into the garden of the world, and the harvest belongs to all. When you learn this art, life becomes poetry. You cease to react and begin to create. You stop waiting for signs and begin to give them. You no longer drift among circumstances, you compose them. You no longer speak of miracles as rare, you recognize them as natural. You see that imagination is not the servant of reality, but its source. And in that knowing, you awaken to your true nature, not a creature bound by chance, but the creator of law itself. Now, having mastered this art, you must go deeper still, for even the law, perfect as it is incomplete without the heart that governs it. Law is structure, love is meaning. Law is precision, love is purpose. Without love, your creation is hollow. Without love, your power becomes pride. Love is the spirit behind every true act of imagination. The recognition that all beings are one consciousness, unfolding itself in infinite forms. Let us therefore turn to the next revelation, to see the face of God not as judge, not as law, but as love. For when you love, you fulfill the law completely. Now we ascend from knowledge into wisdom, from power into purpose, from the understanding of law to the realization of love. For law without love is machinery. It functions perfectly, but without compassion, without song, without the radiance that makes creation beautiful. The moment you awaken to the fact that God is not a distant ruler, but the very awareness within you, the next great unveiling occurs. You discover that this awareness is not cold intellect, but warmth itself. The substance of being, the very texture of consciousness, is love. Every atom in the universe vibrates with it, every breath carries it, every heart beats because of it. To know God as law is to understand order. To know God as love is to become whole. The mind that awakens to law may still live divided, proud of its power, yet indifferent to its brothers. But the mind that awakens to love dissolves the illusion of separation forever. You begin to see that every being you meet is yourself pushed out, that every face you behold is a mirror reflecting some aspect of your own inner world. Love is not sentiment or affection, it is the recognition of unity. When the Master said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," he did not speak of moral duty but of metaphysical truth. He knew that there is no neighbor but God, no other consciousness but the one I am manifesting as many. Once this realization dawns, judgment ceases. You can no longer condemn another without condemning yourself, for you see the same life animating both. The hands that strike and the hands that heal are moved by one awareness wearing many masks. You look upon the oppressor and the oppressed and see the same divine spark crying to be remembered. In that moment, the world's drama no longer terrifies you. It teaches you. You see that even the darkest events are the play of divine forgetfulness, and love becomes your natural response. When you understand love as oneness, you begin to use imagination differently. You no longer imagine against another, for to do so would be to wound your own being. You bless instead of curse, uplift instead of resent. If someone wrongs you, you do not brood on their offense. You imagine them healed, free and kind. You do not fight their shadow, you illumine it. That act alone changes everything, for love is creative light. The moment you hold another in love's vision, the mirror of the world shifts to reflect harmony. This is not morality, it is mechanics. Love is the natural flow of consciousness when it knows itself as one. I remember once a woman came to me, bitter from betrayal. "Neville," she said, "I can't forgive him. He's ruined my life." I told her, "He has done nothing to you that you did not first assume in some way about yourself. If you will see him as forgiven, you will free yourself." She frowned and said, "Why should I bless him?" I said, "Because he is you. You are not blessing the man who hurt you. You are healing the self that imagined the hurt." I asked her to close her eyes and picture him standing before her, smiling, free, changed. I told her to imagine herself shaking his hand, feeling only peace. She resisted at first, but she did it. Months later, she wrote to me saying, "He came to me to apologize. But more than that, I feel new. I feel as if I've awakened from a long dream." That is love as oneness. When love governs your imagination, everything you create carries harmony. You no longer struggle with the law, for love fulfills it effortlessly. The things you desire flow to you not as conquest, but as communion. You begin to see that wealth, health, companionship, success, all these are simply the different languages love speaks through you. They are not rewards, they are reflections. The universe mirrors your inner harmony, and because you love all things come lovingly. This is the meaning behind the scripture. Whatever you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. The least of these is every overlooked thought, every neglected part of yourself, every face you pass by in judgment. To love them is to call them home to the truth of unity. It is not an act of will. It is a natural blossoming of vision. When you see rightly, love flows. You no longer have to try to be good. You cannot help but be compassionate. The desire to bless arises spontaneously because you see that there is no one left to curse. When you look at the world through the eyes of love, you see that nothing is wasted. Even suffering becomes sacred, for it reveals where love has been forgotten. You do not resist it, you transform it. You no longer wish to escape the world, you wish to redeem it. You see that redemption is not the destruction of the world, but the awakening of it, the recognition of the divine in every detail. Love does not annihilate form, it transfigures it. It turns the ordinary into the miraculous, the mundane into the holy, the finite into the infinite. To love as God loves is not to feel emotion toward all things, but to know yourself as all things. It is to move through the world as awareness itself, meeting yourself in every guise. When you love like this, your imagination becomes the servant of harmony. You no longer desire things for selfish pleasure, but for the joy of expression. You manifest beauty not to prove your power, but to celebrate unity. And because there is no separation left within you, your manifestations come swiftly, effortlessly, joyfully, like ripened fruit falling into open hands. Love fulfills the law because it aligns every assumption with truth. When you feel love, you cannot assume lack. When you live in love, you cannot imagine harm. The heart that loves assumes only wholeness, and the law, obeying the heart, produces it. This is why the Master could heal with a touch, raise the dead with a word. His imagination was filled only with love, and love knows no opposite. To love is to see perfection where others see flaw, abundance where others see need, life where others see death. That is the true miracle, the vision of love transforming the world. So now, let love be the lens through which you view all creation. Before you act, imagine love. Before you speak, imagine love. Before you judge, remember love. It is the secret key that turns the law from mechanical precision into divine art. And as you practice this, you will find that your world becomes gentler, your relationships sweeter, your desires purer. You will not have to strive for manifestation, for love will bring all things to you in perfect order. But to remain in love's vision, you must also master forgiveness, for forgiveness is love applied to memory. It is the act of revising the past through compassion, of erasing the residue of pain by rewriting it in light. And that, beloved, is the next movement of our journey, the practice of forgiveness as the highest form of creative revision, where love restores what law alone could not. Let us turn there now and see how forgiveness redeems the imagination and frees man from the ghosts of his own creation. Forgiveness, when rightly understood, is not the act of excusing another for wrongdoing. It is the art of rewriting the script of your own inner world until it reflects love rather than judgment. It is not an emotional concession to morality, it is a metaphysical reordering of creation itself. The world you perceive at this very moment is nothing more than your imagination objectified, your internal state projected outward and clothed in circumstance. Every person who appears in your life is an image of your consciousness made visible, a mirror of your assumptions, a character playing a part you have unknowingly assigned. Therefore, when you forgive, you do not change another, you redeem yourself. You do not alter the external event, you alter the imaginal cause, and the outer reflection must follow. I tell you this because most men live chained to their own unredeemed imagination. They carry resentment like an idol and bow before it daily, rehearsing the scene of offense, speaking the same bitter words in secret, and wondering why peace eludes them. They call this justice, but it is self-crucifixion. For the one you refuse to forgive, you keep bound within your own mind, and because there is no other consciousness but the I am, the bondage you impose upon another becomes your own. This is the mystical meaning behind the words, "Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors." It is not a plea to a deity in the sky, but a reminder of divine law that the measure you give is the measure you receive, because the giver and the receiver are one. When you truly grasp this, forgiveness ceases to be difficult. You stop asking, "How can I forgive them?" and begin to ask, "How can I release myself?" You realize that to hold another in condemnation is to hold yourself in limitation. You begin to see that the only thing that ever needed forgiving was ignorance, the sleep of separation that made man forget his own divinity. Once you see that all wrongdoing arises from that sleep, you can no longer hate the dreamer. You awaken him instead. You rewrite the dream. This is where the art of revision becomes the highest form of prayer. When an unpleasant memory rises, do not resist it or dwell upon it. Enter the scene again in imagination, not as the wounded one, but as the redeemer. See the other person transformed. Hear words of kindness instead of cruelty. Feel peace instead of anger. Let the entire atmosphere of the memory change until it glows with harmony. When you can feel love where once there was pain, the revision is complete. You have redeemed the past, and in doing so, you free both yourself and the one you blamed. I recall the story of a woman who once came to me tormented by a cruel employer. Each day she returned home in tears, saying, Neville, I can't bear it anymore, I told her. Do not fight him outwardly. Change him inwardly. Tonight, before you sleep, imagine him treating you with respect. See his face softened, hear his voice kind. Feel the joy of harmony as if it were already true. She protested. But he's so unjust, I said. Then redeem him, for he can only act out the part your imagination has written. She followed my instruction. Within a week, the man who had belittled her publicly began to praise her in front of others, and not long after, he promoted her. When she thanked me, I said, "Thank yourself. You forgave him by changing the picture. That is the secret. Forgiveness is revision in the language of love. It is not the denial of facts, but the recognition that facts are shadows of forgotten feelings. By changing the inner cause, you dissolve the shadow. The outer world has no choice but to adjust. This is why the Master could say, 'Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.' He was not pleading for mercy. He was declaring vision. He saw their ignorance and refused to hold it against them. He rewrote the scene in love even as they played out hatred. That is divine forgiveness, not passive acceptance, but creative transformation. To live this way is to become a redeemer of the world. Wherever you go, you heal by perception. You walk among men, but you see only God. When others speak of enemies, you bless them silently, knowing that what you bless must bless you. When you encounter injustice, you do not curse it. You imagine justice fulfilled. When you witness suffering, you do not turn away in pity. You see the being whole and radiant. For pity strengthens the problem, but love dissolves it. The more you practice this vision, the more your world becomes radiant with peace, and those around you begin to change in ways that seem miraculous. But it is not miracle, it is law, governed by love. Many will ask, "Neville, how can I forgive what still hurts?" I tell you, start by imagining the feeling of relief. Do not force affection. Begin with peace. Feel the release of having already forgiven, even before you understand how. That feeling will open the door to compassion. As you persist, you will find that the memory itself loses its sting. It becomes soft, luminous, distant, as if it belonged to another life. And in truth, it does. You have crossed from the old state into a new one, and what once was bitter has been transmuted into wisdom. This practice of forgiveness is not limited to others. It must also be turned inward. Many live haunted by the ghost of their own past mistakes, condemning themselves for what they did not know, binding themselves to guilt. But guilt is just memory without understanding. The moment you revise it, you are free. Go back in imagination to the moment you regret. See yourself acting differently. Speak the words you wish you had spoken. Feel the outcome you desire. Do it until that new memory feels real. The past will rearrange itself to align with it, for time itself is an illusion sustained by unredeemed imagination. When you forgive yourself, the world forgives you instantly, because the world is your mirror. To forgive, then, is to awaken. It is to withdraw energy from the nightmare of separation and invest it in the vision of unity. It is to say, "I and my brother are one. I and my past are one. I and my world are one." This is why love never fails, for love is the only power that sees no division to overcome. It simply beholds wholeness and calls it reality. And as you live this way, your imagination becomes the instrument of resurrection. You find that every day presents countless opportunities for forgiveness. Small irritations, misunderstandings, moments of impatience, each one a doorway to recreate the world in love's image. Every act of forgiveness becomes a small creation, and together they weave the fabric of heaven on earth. This is what it means to bring the kingdom of God within. It is not a place you go to after death, but a state you enter whenever you choose love over memory, unity over separation. So let this be your practice. Whenever the old world of hurt rises before you, close your eyes and see it anew. Bless it, love it, transform it. Say quietly within, "This too is God, and God is love." Do this until even your pain becomes light, and you will know what it is to live in the peace that passes understanding. But even love, when fulfilled through forgiveness, points to something higher still. For there comes a moment when man no longer needs to forgive because he no longer perceives offense. The awakened man sees only the face of God in every encounter. He lives beyond reaction, beyond resistance, beyond the cycle of error and correction. He lives as awareness itself, awake, serene, radiant. And it is to that final state we now turn, the awakening of the God within, where forgiveness becomes unnecessary because separation has ended. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when knowledge no longer satisfies, when the study of law and the practice of imagination reach their limit, and something deeper begins to stir. Longing not just to create, but to awaken, not just to manifest, but to remember. This longing is the stirring of God within man, the rumbling of resurrection beneath the tomb of forgetfulness. You feel it when the world loses its power to impress you, when success no longer excites you as it once did, when you sense that there is something beyond even the mastery of creation, a silence calling from within. That call is your own being, inviting you to rise from the sleep of separation and to know yourself as the eternal I am. It is not the death of the body, but the awakening of awareness, not a change in location, but a change in perception. This resurrection begins within the skull, the tomb, where the Son of Man is buried. You have thought of your skull as bone and blood, but in truth, it is the holy sepulchre, the chamber of consciousness where God sleeps in the dream of man. The crucifixion was not an event of wood and nails, it was the descent of infinite awareness into the limitation of human identity. Every man, whether he knows it or not, is God crucified upon the cross of flesh, bound to the senses, pierced by the belief in matter, crowned with the thorns of thought, and every man, in time, must rise again. The resurrection is the moment when you realize that the self you thought you were, the name, the history, the body, is not the truth of you. You awaken to the awareness that precedes all things, that gives life to all things, that was never born and can never die. When that awareness stirs, it begins as a gentle cracking open within, a pressure behind the eyes, a whisper in the mind that says, "Come up higher." You feel yourself being lifted from the narrow tomb of identity, drawn into an immensity that has no boundaries. At first it feels like dying, because the old self trembles in the face of such magnitude. You may feel the body go still, the breath suspend, the mind grow silent, and then suddenly light floods the darkness. You realize that you are the light, and everything you ever believed to be outside you was only your own radiance refracted through the prism of time. I experienced this awakening myself one night in 1959. I found myself lying upon a bed, yet it was not the bed of flesh. I felt an intense vibration within my head, as though energy itself were coiling upward. A great wind began to blow, but there was no air, it was the movement of spirit. Then, as if by an unseen hand, I was lifted from my skull. I passed through its base as one would roll away a stone, and I stood in the presence of the infinite. The room was filled with golden light. The scriptures unfolded before me as living truth. I knew, beyond all reason, that the tomb spoken of in the Gospels is the human skull, and that resurrection is the awakening of God within man. In that moment, I understood every symbol anew. The stone rolled away is the veil of ignorance removed. The empty tomb is the mind freed from limitation. The risen Christ is not a man outside of you, but the eternal I am rising within you as recognition. It is not someone you worship. It is the self you become. The crucifixion and resurrection are not events in time, but states of consciousness in the eternal now. Every time you remember who you truly are, you rise from the dead. Every time you speak from the I am instead of to it, you roll away the stone. Every time you love instead of fear, forgive instead of condemn, imagine instead of doubt, you are resurrecting God within the tomb of humanity. This resurrection is not something you achieve, it is something you remember. It does not depend on virtue, doctrine, or ritual. It happens when the veil of duality falls away, and you know that you and the Father are one. You may still move through the world, eat, sleep, speak, and work. But you do so as one who has awakened in a dream, aware that the dream is your own creation. You play your part with joy, for you no longer mistake the stage for reality. You love freely, for you see every actor as another mask of the same invisible self. You live without fear, for you know that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. And when this awakening deepens, even the distinction between inner and outer dissolves. The imagination you once used deliberately becomes the effortless motion of being itself. You no longer need to visualize or affirm, for creation flows from you as naturally as breath. You do not need to practice the law. You are the law in motion. You no longer need to seek God. You are the presence through which God is known. You no longer ask for signs, for every moment becomes revelation. This is the fulfillment of the promise, the return to the beginning, the completion of the circle, where the Creator and the creature are seen as one. Many fear this awakening, for it means the end of their little self, the death of the ego that clings to form and title. But what dies is only the shadow, the shell, the mask. What remains is infinite life. To awaken is not to lose identity, but to gain true identity. You do not cease to be. You become more fully what you have always been. You discover that the self you once defended so fiercely was only a wave in the ocean of your own being. The wave is not separate from the sea. It is the sea expressing itself. So it is with you. When you awaken, you do not vanish into nothingness. You expand into everything. This is the meaning of salvation. It is not escape from sin or punishment. It is liberation from the illusion of separation. It is not the reward of belief. It is the recognition of being. To awaken is to realize that the I am within you is the same I am that spoke through Moses, that walked the earth as Jesus, that shines through the stars. It is the one life animating all. And once you have seen this, you cannot unsee it. The old world begins to fade, not because it disappears, but because you now see it as dream. You move through it gently, blessing it, redeeming it, knowing it as imagination made visible. And when you live in this awareness, you experience what the scriptures call eternal life. Eternal not because it lasts forever in time, but because it exists outside of time. You stand in the eternal now, the still point of creation where beginning and end are one. You see that nothing was ever lost, nothing ever born, nothing ever died, only forms changing, love unfolding, consciousness playing. You laugh, you weep, you bow in reverence, and you realize that the journey you thought was long was only a dream lasting a heartbeat in the mind of God. This is the resurrection I speak of, not a doctrine to believe, but a reality to experience. It cannot be reasoned. It must be felt. It is the end of seeking and the beginning of knowing. It is the discovery that heaven is not above but within, not future but now, not reward but realization. And once this truth dawns upon you, your life becomes a living sacrament. Every breath becomes prayer, every act becomes creation, every moment becomes the dance of God through you. Now, as you begin to live from this awareness, there arises a new way of being in the world, one of effortless grace, of natural wisdom, of quiet power. You walk no longer as a man trying to find God, but as God expressing himself as man. You love without effort, you speak with authority, and you rest in peace that no circumstance can shake. This is the life of the awakened, and it is to that life we now turn the art of living as one who has remembered that he and his Father are one. To live as one who has awakened is to dwell in an entirely new order of being, an existence no longer defined by reaction, fear, or striving, but by effortless alignment with what simply is. You no longer seek to master life, you let life reveal its mastery through you. The awakened man does not withdraw from the world, nor does he renounce it. He redeems it by seeing it rightly. He walks among men as one who dreams lucidly, fully aware that all he encounters is his own consciousness objectified. Yet he moves with tenderness, for he understands the purpose of the dream. He knows that life, in all its contrasts and paradoxes, exist to awaken love and reveal the hidden unity behind appearance. Living as the awakened means you no longer attempt to change the outer world by effort, by struggle, or by manipulation. You see clearly that such attempts only confirm the illusion of separation. Instead, you live from the end that is always fulfillment, peace, completion. Whatever arises in the world no longer disturbs you, because you have ceased to judge it as good or evil, success or failure. You see it as motion within a stillness that never moves, a dance upon the eternal stage of your own awareness. You understand that the purpose of manifestation is not to perfect form, but to reveal consciousness through form, and so you accept everything as the expression of divine order. You begin to love the process as much as the promise. The awakened man's actions appear ordinary to others, but the spirit from which he acts is extraordinary. He may work, eat, speak, and rest as before, but every act flows from a depth of peace that cannot be disturbed. When he speaks, it is as one who knows his word cannot return void. When he gives as one who has everything. When he listens as though God himself was speaking through every voice. He does not need to teach others who they are. His mere presence reminds them. He is not concerned with reputation or recognition, for he no longer identifies as the personality that seeks approval. He lives in a quiet majesty that has no need to announce itself. I once said, stop trying to be, and simply be. The awakened man lives this truth. He no longer strives to reach God, for he knows that striving itself implies distance, and there is no distance in oneness. Instead, he rests in the awareness that the kingdom is already here, that creation is finished, and that all that remains is the unfolding of what already is. He does not plan with anxiety, for he trusts the divine intelligence that moves through him. His plans are not labors but inspirations, not attempts to secure the future, but joyful expressions of the eternal now. When you live this way, time itself begins to lose its tyranny. You no longer measure progress by days or achievements, because you see that every moment already contains completion. You cease to worry about what will happen tomorrow, for tomorrow is simply another scene in the play you have already written in imagination. You stop fearing loss, for you realize that nothing can be taken from you but illusion. You stop craving gain, for you understand that everything you could ever desire is already yours in the invisible. The awakened man lives in a continuous Sabbath, not a day of rest, but a state of rest, the serene assurance that the work is finished. And this rest does not make him idle. On the contrary, his actions become more potent, more inspired, more effortless. He no longer acts from want, but from fullness. His words carry authority, because they are spoken from truth, not from need. His energy is not drained by worry, for worry no longer exists in him. He is like a tree rooted by living waters, unshaken by storm, unhurried by season, yielding fruit in its own appointed time. When others look upon him, they feel peace without knowing why. They sense in him a stillness that speaks louder than words. That stillness is God made visible. You may wonder, how can I live this way while still surrounded by a world of struggle and noise? I tell you, you live it by remembering who you are in the midst of it. The awakened man does not escape the world. He redeems it by holding the vision of perfection where others see chaos. He looks upon sickness and knows health, looks upon poverty and feels abundance, looks upon conflict and assumes peace. He is not fooled by appearances, because he knows they are only reflections of passing states. His faith does not depend on sight, for his sight depends on faith. And because he remains loyal to the unseen, the seen must conform. You begin to live as the awakened when you stop reacting and start creating, when you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin saying, what state of consciousness produced this? And what new state shall I now assume? Every challenge becomes an opportunity to remember truth. Every obstacle becomes an invitation to create. Every relationship becomes a mirror, showing you where you have yet to love. You stop running from difficulty, because you see that even difficulty serves awakening. You see that everything conspires for your realization, and so you meet life with gratitude instead of resistance. Gratitude becomes your natural breath. You no longer practice it as a discipline. It becomes your very mode of being. For when you live in the awareness of unity, how can you not be grateful? Every face you see is the face of God smiling back at you. Every experience, even those once called sorrowful, reveals the hidden blessing of growth. You begin to bless the rain as much as the sunshine, the night as much as the day, the loss as much as the gain. Gratitude becomes not a reaction to good things, but the recognition that all things are good. There is a sweetness in this state that cannot be described, only felt. It is the still joy that comes from knowing that you need nothing and lack nothing. It is the peace that surpasses understanding because it no longer depends on understanding. It is the laughter of God echoing through your being as you watch the play of life unfold exactly as it should. You do not attempt to direct the play anymore, you simply play your part with grace. You do not cling to outcomes, for you know the author. You do not fear endings, for you have tasted eternity. Living as the awakened is not about perfection, it is about presence. It is not about performing holiness, but embodying wholeness. The awakened man still walks among the shadows of the world, but he carries light wherever he goes, and because of him, the darkness begins to glow. He does not try to convert others, he simply radiates truth. His life itself becomes the teaching, his peace the sermon, his joy the proof. And when you live in this awareness long enough, something even greater unfolds. You begin to feel creation responding to you in harmony. Nature speaks to you in whispers of recognition. Events align with uncanny precision. The universe becomes intimate, alive, tender. You realize that what you once called coincidence is simply communion, the reflection of your inner harmony in outer form. The world itself becomes your companion, echoing your love back to you in every detail. This is what it means to live as the awakened. You move through the world, but the world moves through you. You create without strain, love without fear, and exist without effort. You are no longer seeking God, for you have found him everywhere, in the breath, in the silence, in the laughter of children, in the sound of the wind through the trees. Every heartbeat is a hymn, every step a prayer, every glance a revelation. And now, as this great journey nears its completion, you understand that awakening was never an achievement, but a remembrance. You have not ascended to some distant realm, you have simply opened your eyes to what has always been true. You have discovered that heaven is not above but within, and that the God you sought has always been the I am that says, "Be still and know." So let us seal this realization, not with striving, but with silence. Let us rest in the knowing that the work is finished, that the word has become flesh, that the dream has awakened to itself. And as we close, let us remember the truth that unites every teaching, every law, every revelation, that love is all there is, that God and man are one, that the dreamer and the dream are the same being. There is a joy that arrives when you no longer look for evidence, when the hunger for proof dissolves, and you rest in the knowing that the unseen is already complete. It is a joy unlike the fleeting happiness of possession or achievement, for it is not born of condition. It does not depend on the outcome of desire. It arises from the quiet certainty that the invisible has already been spoken into being, and that the visible world, though it lags in time, can do nothing but catch up. This is the joy of unseen fulfillment, the secret delight of those who have learned to live by faith rather than sight. It is not the triumphal shout of the one who wins a battle. It is the serene laughter of the one who knows there was never a battle to begin with. You see, the unawakened man finds joy only in what he can touch and prove. He waits for the outer sign to grant him permission to feel secure. And so his joy is always postponed, always fragile, always held hostage by circumstance. But the awakened man knows that the true cause of joy lies not in what appears, but in what is. He knows that consciousness creates reality, and therefore the feeling of fulfillment, when faithfully assumed, is not a prelude to manifestation, but the manifestation itself, clothed for a time in invisibility. The joy you feel in faith is not anticipation, it is completion. It is the echo of creation reverberating through the heart. When you begin to live in this unseen joy, You enter a state that the scriptures describe as thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is not gratitude for what has happened, it is gratitude that it is done. It is not saying, thank you for giving it to me, but thank you because it is already mine. It is the calm acknowledgement of spiritual fact preceding sensory proof. The moment you can give thanks for what the world cannot yet see, you declare your allegiance to truth over appearance, and truth, being eternal, must prevail. In this joy, there is no strain, no pleading, no repetition of desire. You no longer say, please let it happen. You say instead, it is finished. And you feel the peace that comes from finality. The awakened heart does not shout its prayers to the heavens. It whispers its decrees in silence. For the moment you feel joy, you have entered the Sabbath of creation, the divine rest that follows completion. This is what it means to rejoice always. It is not a command to force happiness, but an invitation to abide in fulfillment. I recall a time early in my teaching when a student came to me burdened with despair. Neville, she said, I've imagined, I've affirmed, I've prayed, but nothing has changed. How can I feel joy when I see no result? I told her, you do not feel joy because of the result. You feel joy into the result. Your feeling is not the effect, it is the cause. Begin now to celebrate the unseen, and the seen will follow. She looked at me as though I had spoken madness, but she obeyed. Each night, she lay upon her bed and simply whispered, thank you. Not for anything in particular, just thank you. She let that gratitude fill her chest until tears came. Weeks passed, and then one morning, she awoke to find her situation transformed. The money she needed arrived through a channel she had never considered. It felt like a miracle, she told me. But I said, no, my dear. It was the natural consequence of your thanksgiving. You rejoiced before the harvest, and the harvest came. The joy of unseen fulfillment is not denial of reality, it is recognition of higher reality. It does not pretend that facts do not exist. It simply acknowledges that facts are fluid, that they yield to faith as clay yields to the potter's hands. It is to look upon lack and say, even this is part of my abundance. To face delay and say, even this is fulfillment unfolding. To see what the senses call death and know it as transformation. This joy cannot be taken from you, because it does not come from what changes. It comes from what is. It is the quiet laughter of God knowing himself through you. When you live in this state, the world begins to mirror it back in subtle, exquisite ways. You will find yourself surrounded by synchronicities, gentle confirmations that whisper, yes, it is so. A song will play at just the right moment. A stranger will speak words that echo your silent thought. A door will open without your knocking. The outer world begins to behave like a friend, not because it has changed in essence, but because you have. You are no longer pleading with life, you are dancing with it. And this dance is not hurried. The joy of unseen fulfillment moves at the rhythm of eternity, not of time. There is no impatience in it, for impatience belongs to the one who doubts. Joy knows that all is well, even when appearances tremble. It watches events with the eyes of love and says, everything is unfolding perfectly. And because it expects perfection, it finds it. For as the law declares, according to your faith, be it done unto you. Faith is not belief in something outside yourself. It is loyalty to the unseen truth within. The one who lives in this joy no longer seeks signs. He knows that the signs are always following, never preceding. He understands that manifestation is the shadow of feeling, and that to chase the shadow is folly. He abides in the substance, the feeling of already being that which he desires, and the shadow takes care of itself. He does not measure progress, for progress implies incompletion. He rests in wholeness, and wholeness reveals itself. To cultivate this state, you must practice the art of inner celebration. Close your eyes often, not to escape the world, but to honor it. Withdraw into your inner chamber and give thanks for the unseen. Feel the sweetness of accomplishment without striving. Hear within you the quiet applause of the infinite saying, well done, Let this joy be your atmosphere, your resting place, your song. When you walk, walk as one who has already arrived. When you speak, speak as one who has already been heard. When you love, love as one who has nothing left to gain. This is living in the joy of unseen fulfillment. And as you sustain this joy, you will see how effortlessly creation responds. You will find yourself moving through life in a current of grace. Circumstances rearrange, obstacles dissolve, needs are met before they are voiced. You will laugh often, for you will see the divine humor behind all events. Even moments of challenge will become opportunities to smile, for you will know that what appears as resistance is simply love sharpening your faith. This joy is the highest act of worship, for it honors God not as a power to be convinced, but as a presence already fulfilled. It is the recognition that all is finished, that you stand in the completion of what eternity has already declared perfect. When you live this way, you realize that joy is not something you enter, it is what you are. It is the essence of being, the natural fragrance of the soul when the mind has stopped arguing with life. So now, as this journey reaches its completion, remember this: you began by searching for God outside yourself, and you end by realizing that you were never apart from Him. You have discovered that God is not the object of worship, but the subject of all awareness. The I am within that creates by assumption, governs by law, and fulfills by love. And as you rest in this knowing, let your heart overflow with the joy of unseen fulfillment, for it is the sign that you have awakened. You no longer pray for miracles, you live as one. You no longer seek blessings, you are the blessing. You no longer chase light, you have become it. And so the story comes full circle. The dreamer awakens within his dream. The Creator recognizes his creation, the Son remembers the Father, and the two are one. Nothing has changed, yet everything is transformed. The outer world continues to move, but you move with it in stillness, laughing softly at the cosmic play. You know now that all is imagination, and imagination is God. And because you know this, you can finally rest not in resignation, but in joy, in thanksgiving, in peace, for the promise is fulfilled, and the command is complete.